Hi there, I'm Tiff. This is Tiff Reads Books, and today I am on the struggle bus, but I'm going to talk to you anyway. Why? Because I feel the need to before I start reading another book and I forget everything that I want to say about this one. So, I read books and I talk to you about them, and today I read Holly by Stephen King. This is good timing because this was literally like 2 days ago announced as the Goodreads Choice Awards winner, so we're going to talk about it. This is the most recent release by Stephen King. It came out this year. And this follows a main character called Holly. And I think there's a few things I want to touch on in this video. So the first thing I want to touch on is that everybody always asks if you need to read the other books to have read this book. And I think that's because Goodreads has it listed as like Holly number 5 or 6 or something. And the answer to that question is no. It has literally been asked almost every single day on the Stephen King sub on Reddit since this book was released. Like, if you go and look through that sub, I think a bunch of them get deleted because it's like, this has already been asked and answered. But it gets asked all the time. So, you do not need to read the other books. This is a standalone. The doggo is being emotional today. Come here. Come on. Ow, that's my foot. Come on. Okay. So he's gonna get some pets because he's being very emotional today. We're gonna go on a long walk after this. That'll hopefully cheer him up. But you don't need to read the other books to have read this one, and that is because this is written as a standalone. And it even says on the back of the book, I could never let Holly Gibney go. She was supposed to be a walk-on character in Mr. Mercedes, and she stole the book and stole my heart. Holly, in italics, meaning this book, is all her. Stephen King. Okay, so this is his comfort character right now. And he kind of does these types of things a lot where he repeats characters. And you do not have to have read the other books that the characters are in to read this book. And that is because Holly is not the main character in the other books. She's the main character in this book. So she started off in the Bill Hodges trilogy, which follows a private detective, Bill Hodges, and the growth of his detective agency as he investigates some events that end up having a sort of supernatural nature to them, a la a Stephen King twist. So you do not have to have read those books, and I can tell you that because I haven't read those books. I read one of them. I read Finders Keepers, which I believe Finders Keepers. It's the middle book. It happens to also be what the detective agency is named. And I picked it up in a charity shop when I was living in the UK for like 50p. Saw it and read the back. This sounds interesting. Nowhere in the back of the book or anything did it say it was part of a trilogy. So I just picked it up and read it as a standalone. And the cool thing was you could read it as a standalone, and I did. I didn't feel lost. There was no point where I was like, oh, I clearly am missing something. Because the way that Stephen King writes his characters, he gives you a little bit of backstory every time he introduces them anyway. So the way the characters were connected to each other, which most of them are in this book as well, was explained to us. And it's shown to us here too. It's not even told to us, it's shown to us through their interactions and their conversations. So if you really want to, you can, but you don't need to have read the Bill Hodges trilogy to read this book. So this follows later after also the events of The Outsider, which is loosely connected as well. So you don't have to have read the Bill Hodges trilogy to read The Outsider. And The Outsider, Holly shows up near the end of the book. She's brought on as like a special consultant, and we really didn't need to have read the other book to know who she is, because she is introduced to us as a new character, because she's introduced to the characters in the book as a new character, as someone they've never met in their life. So we are getting the same information that they're getting. We don't really need to know that. I guess there's a short story about her in the collection If It Bleeds. I have not read it yet. It is on my list to pick that up. So the answer to that constantly asked question, no, you don't need to have read the other books. It's the same as asking, do I have had to read Rose Madder before I read Desperation because Cynthia is a character in both of them? No, you don't. Because the beginning of Desperation gives us everything we need to know about Cynthia from what she experienced during the course of Rose Madder. It's really not necessary. We are not constantly referencing, okay, we are referencing quite a bit, but we're always just saying like, oh, it's like that time I had the run-in with this guy. Or it's not like the time I had the run-in with this guy. And it's really just a character thinking about something that happened to them in their past, which is the way it's written in tons of different books. So you really don't need to have read it. Okay. Second thing about this book is it's not a horror. And I am so mad about it having won the Goodreads Choice Awards in the horror category, because it is not a horror. This is a thriller. And the reason that I can tell you for sure that I am right, that this is not a horror, is because I looked up the definition of the difference between a horror and a thriller. And you know what the difference is? Difference, because they can be overlapping in a lot of ways. Because the things that happen in thrillers, which are typically written as like a crime story, they can be pretty horrific. We're talking about murders, we're talking about essays, we're talking about kidnapping, we're talking about all sorts of things in a thriller. And those types of things can happen in a horror as well, because those can be horrific. And the difference, according to most literary people, is that in the thriller, we are actually trying to solve the mystery. And Holly is a detective. Hugo, I'm not mad at you. Holly is a detective, and she is trying to solve a missing person case in the course of this book. And let me make sure I can tell you this without spoiling, so hold on. Okay, so I can tell you some stuff without spoiling because it has it in the synopsis. So we're following Holly after Bill has already passed away, and Holly has inherited the detective agency from him. And then we are starting out, and this can be a little bit, this might be hard for some people to read because we're starting out in 2021, like second wave of COVID, and it is talked about a lot in this book. It was really interesting to read it from that, like to see these things. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm giving you a synopsis. So her mother has actually just passed away, and her partner, detective partner Pete, has COVID as well. So Holly's supposed to be on leave, bereavement, and they've like closed the office, but she gets this frantic call from this woman named Penny Doll, and her daughter has gone missing, and she's been missing for like 2 or 3 weeks now, and the police aren't doing enough according to Penny, and she's very worried, and she wants to speak to Holly because she has heard good reviews of the Finders Keepers detective agency. Because Holly is trying to deal with her grief, she decides to go ahead and take the case and do it all on her own, which always a good setup for a lone woman. And Holly's a bit older. She's in her 50s, so she's aware that she is making probably a stupid decision, but she's going to do it anyway. So we're following her as she's trying to discover what happened to Bonnie Ray Doll, the missing woman that we are talking about. And at the same time, we're getting flashbacks from 2012, 2015, 2018, and then this year, following these two unlikely suspects. So we are revealed straight away who the villain is. In the synopsis even, we are told that it is, let's see, picture of respectability, married octogenarians devoted to each other and semi-retired lifelong academics, but they're harboring an unholy secret in the basement of their well-kept book-lined home, one that may be related to Bonnie's disappearance. So we're told basically who the bad guys are from the beginning. We're shown it in the first chapter. And I kind of like that because it's like, we know, and we're like urging Holly, like, put the pieces together, come on, put the pieces together. And we're doing that through like the whole book, and we're getting more and more information about these people. And the little twist in there about what they're doing and why they're doing it is pretty good. It's revealed very slowly, so you can pick it up before the actual reveal, but when you get that little moment of reveal where you're like, oh my god, is this what's happening? Oh my god, is that really what's happening? And then you get the little reveal and you're like, oh god, that is what's happening. It worked for me. Even though it was obvious, but it was obvious in a way where you're like, I can't be right about this, can I? Like, type of way. So, yeah. And then Holly ends up putting all the pieces together along with help from Jerome and Barbara, who are two younger characters that we meet in the Bill Hodges trilogy, but their connection to Holly is also explained in this book. So, but they both have their own things going on at the moment, so they're not super helpful, but they help where they can. And coming in clutch when needed. So that's kind of the best synopsis I can give without spoiling it for you. But it is a thriller. It's a thriller with some horrific things that happen in it. But even as far as Stephen King goes, this isn't very gory. It's not very gruesome. This is actually was kind of a breath of fresh air from some of the Stephen King stuff I've been reading, because there was no sexual assault in it. There wasn't even any talk of like sex really in it. Like nothing. There was like a moment where a character asks if that's what's about to happen to her. That's literally the only time, and they're like, no, that's stupid. Like, so it's kind of nice to have like a female character that Stephen King doesn't have be assaulted in that way. So that was nice. So it's honestly like, as far as horror goes, this would be an incredibly mild horror book. If you've read this, you can talk to me about it in the comments, but considering what the villains are doing to people in the book, it still wasn't even very graphic when it really could have been. So, okay, we're laying down on the rug now. All right, so as far as horror goes, this isn't even that horrific, okay? So, it should not have won the Goodreads Choice Awards for horror. Is this a good book? Yes. Is it the best of the year? Absolutely not. Especially not in the thriller category or like the horror category. Monstrilio was robbed, okay? Monstrilio was robbed. I haven't read a lot of the other ones that are out this year because I've been reading backlisted things. So I like this book, but it's not one of King's best. It's not a top thriller of the year, because I read more thrillers this year. I think I read 2 of the thriller category options, and honestly, this was maybe a little bit better than All the Dangerous Things because the pacing was better. But What Lies in the Woods was better. It was a better thriller than this, in my opinion. So this just won because of name recognition, if you ask me. So that's my thoughts on that. That honestly, I could rant and rant, but it's the same opinion over and over. It's not a horror. It was an okay book. The third thing I want to touch on is that a bunch of the reviews when this first came out were people being like, I DNF'd it. This is a terrible book because it talks negatively about Trump. And I still love that King fans can expect him to be pro-Trump. Like, it's so wild to me to expect Stephen King to be pro-Trump or right-wing in any way. It's just wild to me that people can have that opinion, and have read his books and still have that opinion. God, I really want to have that conversation, but I need to do some more research. So what I did when I was reading is I actually tabbed this, and I tabbed everywhere that Trump was mentioned with a like darker purple color, because I color coded it to this. So these are my colors. So I did this for Trump. This is like moments where I identified with Holly, because the other thing I'm going to talk about is how much people hate her. And then this one is references to other books. I could have done shows too, but I would have ran out of tabs, because the thing about Holly is she likes movies and TV shows and stuff. So there's some mentions of other books, but Holly is not a big reader. She's a big TV watcher. She's like a mild reader. But we do have some other things referenced. So let me check out the tabs. So in the first one where Trump was mentioned was on page 19, which I had to laugh about. And it says these 2 characters are talking about COVID. So we're in peak COVID. So we get some really interesting like reflections on things that I feel so surreal to think back about it, but they were actual things we had. And this was another complaint that people had. It kind of goes along with the Trump thing, is that when characters are meeting each other, they're asking, are you vaxxed? And honestly, that was, if you were someone who cared about it, and Holly, it makes sense for her character to be someone who cares about that, you would ask people that. Like, you would wear your mask, and if someone was like, oh, you can take it off, you'd be like, well, have you been vaccinated? And if they said no, you're like, I'm keeping it on. Even sometimes a lot of people would keep it on. Even if, like I did, I was vaccinated, and even if I was with other people that were vaccinated, I kept my mask on most of the time. Especially because I had a breakthrough case at one point. Well, at the end of 2021, I had a breakthrough case. So I think most of us have at this point, but we're set in the summer of 2021, and we are in the Midwest, where they're in an area where it's like up to everyone to make the choices of what they want to make. So we talk a lot about COVID. We get a lot of mask discussion, people wearing masks, people asking if they're vaxxed, people who have different opinions on it throughout the book, which was very real. And it was so surreal to read it and go, oh my God, we did do that. We did have those conversations. That was anytime you met someone, it was like, oh, are you vaxxed? Or do you know anyone who's had it? Or, you know, all these different, it's so weird. So they're talking about Trump, and one person says, they're talking about the booster vaccines that are coming out, and bonus, Trump's gone, is the phrase. And that was when people DNF'd it, because a character is excited that Trump's gone. And then Holly says, leaving behind a country at war with itself. So, which just felt very real. And then the next one was page 37. Someone's talking about the husband that they divorced. They got divorced during the Trump administration because they couldn't agree on politics, and that was very real, something that happened. So that was a conversation that was happening at the time. And that's the thing, is this is very much set in 2021 specifically. There's another reference on page 117 that is just a character talking about how they feel about Trump, talking about running again. And then there's like 3 more references throughout the rest of the book. So page 252, or even actually 2 more references, 252 and 266, and then none in the last like 200 pages. So what's that, 5 did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 references over the course of a 460 page book. So for all the people that are like, oh, it mentions Trump constantly, I tabbed every single incident of it. 5. That's it. And that's normal for people having conversations during that time period. So was this like, did nothing but talk about politics and Trump? No. If you are someone who thinks that COVID was political, then yeah, because there's a lot of COVID talk in that. But honestly, at that point in time, we were constantly talking about it. So it makes sense. But even so, in the last like 200 pages, that conversation stops as well, because we've kind of already met everyone we're going to meet. We've had all those interactions, and we kind of stopped talking about it as well. So it doesn't even constantly do that. But it very much has a role to play in the story because of the setting, the timeline, and what was happening at the time the story is set in. It has a role to play. So there's that conversation. The last thing, the dog is pacing. Hold on. Hugin, come here. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is how much people hate Holly. And by people, I mean the people online. Like, and I find this weird, and I think I still have them. I screenshot a few where people asked in the Stephen King sub, why does everyone hate Holly so much? And I searched that online as well to see if it, because I know it had been asked other times in the subs, I was trying to find it. There was actually a conversation on Goodreads people were having where someone asked, what's everyone's opinions on Holly? And a lot of, in particular, men were saying how much they hated her as a main character. And when asked, it was, she uses the word poopy. Holly doesn't swear. And I think that bothers people, but it fits with her character and the way she was raised. And not everyone swears. I know tons of people who don't. Like, especially my friends with kids who are trying to not in front of their kids anymore because their kids are copying them. So, as someone who accidentally said ass in front of my 3-year-old nephew recently, I probably should stop swearing in front of certain people as well. But anyway, she doesn't swear. She uses words like poopy and icky, and is it a little immature? Yeah, but it's not all the time. Like, and it's like, it's a dialogue choice for a character. But the fact that that is like, was enough of a turnoff of people for this character is very weird to me, and it's a little misogynistic, to be honest. She has anxiety. She has a lot of social anxiety, and she gets better about it as the book goes on, which is why I said it makes sense as the books go on. That's why I said it makes sense for her to be someone who asks, are people vaccinated? Are they wearing their masks? Because she has that anxiety about health and other social situations and all sorts of stuff. But she is growing, and I think we see her in therapy in some of the other books. Like, she's actually like dealing with learning how to manage her anxiety, but especially because her job requires her to be social and to interact with people. So that bothers people that, oh, this character with anxiety still calls people instead of just texting them. I'm like, yeah, but she's 50. That's pretty normal for someone in their 50s. You're thinking of her as someone your age who is used to texting, because when we were like late teens, that's what we did, and millennials don't call people. But she's not a millennial, she's a Gen Xer. They call people. I know, because I have Gen X relatives and they call you. So there's nothing wrong with writing her that way, but I think people forget that she's in her late 50s. She's an older character, which is another thing that I actually kind of like about her. It is nice to have a female lead who is in her 50s and has this nice arc of development from someone who dealt with some pretty shitty things, doesn't have the best relationship with her family, and as a result of that ended up with some pretty heavy anxiety. And Stephen King is getting better as the years go on about writing people who have different mental health symptoms, and not writing them in a demeaning way or and talking about them in a way that is unkind. He's getting better about his language with those things, and having just reread Lisi's story, where we do have a character who has a few different mental health issues, and the way that she's talked about is pretty horrible. And I got massively downvoted for saying that it would be nice to have a conversation about that on newer publications of the book, to be like, hey, keep in mind this was a product of its time. I don't think there's a problem with saying those types of things, but apparently there is if you're a Stephen King bro TM. So, anyway, that's besides the point. Well, no, it is part of the point, because the point is that the dog's like giving me the eyes that he wants to go. This is our normal walk time. So this is a character who is not a badass from the beginning, but she does go through an arc of character development where she's a pretty strong character by the end of this book. And going into it, she is too, but she has like a little bit of growth in this book too that I really enjoyed. I think it's nice to see an older female character who is a detective, who is confident on her own. She's actually someone who is not in a relationship and is not looking to be in one. And it was so nice to have that, to see a woman who is just living her life on her own. She's got her apartment, she's got her job, she's happy with that. That is enough for her. And we don't often see that with female characters in this type of book. There usually is some sort of love interest that happens, and it's nice to see that, because when we have these detective stories from a male perspective, we don't always have that romance arc, and it's just nice to have that. Overall, this was a 4-star for me. The pacing was fine, but there were places where I was like, it's getting a little slow. I struggled. A lot of days I only read like 10 pages of this book. This book took me 7 days to read, which is long for me, and my plans are so messed up now. So it could have been a little faster paced. The reveal was fine. I think, like I said, I liked the way the actual reveal was, but I kind of would have liked to have maybe the villains not be revealed to us in the first couple of chapters. Or I would have liked to have maybe a little more time with each of the other victims, rather than like the way that it was done. I think there's some things that could have been done a little bit better. It's not a 5 because it just wasn't super exciting for me. It could have been much more exciting, I think. I like the characters in this book. I like the themes of it. I like the discussion of grief and loss, and which seems to be a big theme for me this year, because Holly is grieving her mom the whole time, and she's kind of putting to bed the relationship she had with her mom and coming to terms with it. And I like those conversations, especially as someone who has mommy issues myself. I like the discussion on mother-daughter relationships, especially ones who are as tumultuous as this one is. I liked the conversation on friendships and found family, and I liked the surrealness of looking back on how we all acted during 2021, and just these last 3 years have been a fever dream, I think, for most of us. And it kind of made me grateful that I am someone who did not lose people to COVID. There was a moment in the end of 2021 where I thought I was going to lose both of my parents, but they pulled through. And so that's good. And it definitely it was having that conversation of having lost someone close to you, while other people in the world around you that you're interacting with are telling you that it's a hoax. So yeah, it was a good conversation on stuff that has recently happened, if you're in a place where you can have that conversation, because I think not everyone's ready yet, and that's understandable. I have a friend who lost damn near most of her family. So yeah, anyway, it's got some themes that I enjoyed. I think this was one of his most diverse books. Yeah. And it had the least amount of racist characters. As Stephen King goes, our villains are usually racist because it's another way to make us dislike them and feel uncomfortable by them. So, but it wasn't as bad. We didn't have the N-word thrown around a whole bunch. So that was nice. Anyway, I'm rambling now. So, wrapping it up, 4 stars. Do I think it deserved to win? Hell no. It should have been in the thriller category, and it should not have won the thriller category either. But the thing is, it's name recognition. No matter where you put Stephen King, he's probably going to win. His short story collection might not. So, depending on what else he's got coming out this year. Anyway, let me know if you read this. Let me know if you liked it. And if you had different thoughts than me, please tell me, because I'm very curious to know. And yeah, I am gonna go take the dog for a walk before he decides he hates me. So, this was rambly, and I hope you got something out of it. Also, my cover glows in the dark. So if you have this cover and you haven't checked it out yet, I had to charge it with a UV flashlight, but the windows glow in the dark, which is pretty cool. So, all right. I'll see you soon. Thanks for sticking around.